Bonjour tout le monde. Hello, everyone. This is our high performance update meeting for March 2026. So before we begin, I want to acknowledge that Boxing Canada operates on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded lands of many Indigenous peoples. We aim to share our sport in the same spirit of respect and community that they share this land with us. At Boxing Canada, we strive to create a welcoming environment for all athletes, coaches, and officials where we support each other to improve and reach our goals. Chez Boxing Canada, nous offrons de créer un environnement attirant pour tous les athlètes et entraîneurs officiels et nous soutenons mutuellement pour progresser et atteindre nos objectifs. La présentation d'aujourd'hui se déroule principalement en anglais, mais si vous avez des questions, n'hésitez pas à nous envoyer par email des questions dans la langue de votre choix. So looking at our agenda for today, we're going to review how we did in Thailand at the Futures Cup. We'll look at the U17, U19, U23 Nationals. And then we'll start to look forward with some NTP program updates and a review of sort of where we're at with our different pathways for A, B, C, and U19 tours. We'll talk a little bit about upcoming elite nationals in Cape Breton, and then we'll look through some upcoming key dates. So let's turn our view to Thailand. So the tour, of course, is complete. Congratulations to the 7 athletes and 2 coaches who were there. We were very impressed with the quality of the competition. It was massive, right? Many categories had rounds of 32 in them, which is quite a change from what we're used to seeing. Selection for this event was primarily based on our January camp evaluations using our winning style of play assessment tool. And then with some discretion from our staff. And this tour was really about trying to get athletes out for some international experience before the Youth Olympic Games. And the international standard for qualifying for the Youth Olympic Games was that you had to compete at the Thailand event, but there is no hard and fast performance level that athletes needed to attain. What I will say is the competition was quite mixed. Depending on who you got in the draw, it could be dramatically different levels of skill that you were looking at. But for all of our athletes, we think they performed well, and they certainly made the most out of the opportunity because we had a number of days of really high quality sparring available to us once our athletes had exited from the actual tournament. So we're very happy with that. We hope to see each of these athletes continue on both later this season and through their careers as they pursue excellence in boxing. Moving on to our U17, U19, and U23 Nationals. Of course, these just concluded over in Calgary. The event was combined, of course, with the Canada Cup, and there was 282 bouts, which was made for a very, very busy 4 days. But I think overall the tournament went pretty well. We, of course, did have a few challenges every now and then. The fact that we didn't have our scoring computers due to, let's say, outside intervention that we didn't have a lot of control over. Didn't make things easy. But boxing continued, and we want to thank the officials for their flexibility and their efforts in making sure that the competition went on without a hitch. So we did do assessments on all the U19 athletes. We tried to hit as many of the U23 and other athletes as well. But those will be sent out shortly. It's going to take us some time to compile all of them because obviously with 282 bouts in total, there's a lot going on. But I think we really got a solid benchmark as to where we stood after seeing that competition. And what I will say is a few things that stood out to me personally. And the first is it was great to see that the quality of participation across the country appears to be increasing. So we're seeing more provinces contributing to the medal table. We're seeing a greater variety of clubs contributing to the medal table. And the overall performance of the athletes, I think everyone would agree, is we are seeing better boxing at younger ages. And we really need to enforce this. In order for our national team athletes, whether it's U17, U19, U23, or senior, to do well internationally, they need to be conforming to a style of boxing that is going to help them internationally. And we know through lots of experience that especially at a U17 and U19 level, it can be easy to just sort of overpower or overwhelm your opponent with fitness. But at the U17 and U19 levels, that can often be um, uh, developmentally constrained, right? So if you have an athlete who has just matured faster than other athletes, they're going to have an advantage, not necessarily because of skill, but because of developmental fitness. And once you hit sort of the end of U23, most of those advantages have disappeared, and really it comes down to hours of training. So we would rather see athletes winning on skill rather than just sort of brute force. Because if you get too used to brute forcing your way through a tournament and then you go international and you're up against athletes who are highly skilled and are really highly focused on actually achieving the goals that are laid out in the judging criteria, we're going to end up with problems. So like I said, it was good to see that the level of skill was continuing to improve. And of course, the results of this we'll start seeing later on in this presentation as we talk about selections for other events. And so, speaking of other events, so just a reminder that we've got our pathway to the Olympics. This is unchanged for the past couple of months. However, I will say it's not official yet, but we continue hearing that instead of Pan Am Games being a qualifier, it will not be Pan Am Games and it will instead be a Continental Championships. And this makes sense. The Pan Am Games is a restricted entry, which means you need to qualify to get in. And while the Pan Am Games is a fantastic event, if not every nation within the continent has equal opportunity to send athletes, that can disrupt the Olympic qualification process. So we think this is a good change, but we just haven't got final word on it yet. But what we anticipate will happen is that the Continental Championships, which will be used as the Continental qualifier, will happen ahead of the Pan Am Games. The Pan Am Games, of course, scheduled for late in 2027. So we're probably looking at sort of a mid 2027 for the Continental Championships. And then our athletes who competed at the Continental Championships will use that as a qualifier to get into the Pan Am Games, which we will still be attending. We still think it's a fantastic event and very important. So looking at our NDP, sort of if we do sort of an overview here, we do have some updates. So we've got our Brazil tour coming up, China coming up, and of course our Continentals and Commonwealth Games later in the season. Our B tour, we've had the team over in Spain. We've made a change from Turkey to Serbia, which is now all set up and ready to go. Then we've got the B tour in the Netherlands, and then a change. We were going to go down to Colombia, but sort of the planning on that has been challenging with not getting as much information from the Colombians as we need in order to feel confident that we can make a tour with sufficient notice. So we're pivoting to Ireland, but we'll talk about that in a second. And then our C Tour, which is sort of our dual meets. So Regina, and then an event hosted by the Blue Water Boxing Club, and then one out in Selkirk, and then one in Winnipeg. And of course, our U19, we'll talk about this a little bit more with a developmental tour to Hungary, then our U19 World Championships, and then U17s going down to Kansas City for a continental level event, and of course Youth Olympic Games towards the end of the year. So if we look at the graphic visualization. Just a reminder, we try to keep this up to date as much as we can, although as I'm looking at it now, I see one thing immediately on there that just says line label, which is not ideal, but we'll get that fixed in the next update. But this is, of course, available in the high performance section of the website. I encourage everyone to take a look. And a reminder, you have to look at the visualization in concert with the actual long format document, because this tells you sort of the general moves that are available and what generally athletes can go to, but it doesn't tell you how. And the how, of course, is extremely important. And just a reminder how this is structured. So our A-level tours are sort of in that red color. This would be our elite national team, and in general, we do not fill all of the spots that are available to us on these tours. The other thing to remember about this A-level events is that they have to be open and attended by all nations who are members of World Boxing. So it's not limited in any way. So for instance, Commonwealth Games, that's a big event this year, but it is not open to everyone. So it does not qualify as a Class A event. Similarly, the Continental Championships, we will be sending our A team to the Continental Championships, but it is not a Class A event because, of course, if you're not in the north or middle or central or South America, you don't get to go. So then when we look at our B class, so these are international events, but they are somewhat limited in some way by their registration. So examples of those would be the World Boxing Challenge Cups, which we, of course, didn't actually have any this year. World Boxing was prioritizing the World Cups and getting that circuit together, and hopefully we'll have them again next year. But when we looked at replacements, we looked at international open competitions where we knew multiple national teams would be competing, and that it wasn't a club versus club, it was a national team versus national team event. So Boxam would be an example of this. The event in Serbia is an example of this. Eindhoven is an example of this. Um, and certainly as we go on, we'll identify others in future years of similar caliber. And then our C-level events. So these are our Canadian dual meets. So these are opportunities for Canada to compete against one other country at home in a situation where we control a lot of, frankly, we control the venue, we control the food, we control transit, we control accommodation. So the idea is to provide an easy and familiar first international experience to sort of members of our high performance community, so athletes in our high performance community, and in particular athletes who have probably not yet been out on a B tour or A tour event. That's not universal. We're of course subject a little bit to who the other nations send, and if they only send, a men's super heavyweight, then we have to find a men's super heavyweight in order to compete against them. So it could be that there's a mix of A team and B team in there, but really we're looking at these sort of first time competing internationally for the national team athletes. And then of course we've got our U19 and now also some U17 events in there. And this is stuff like the Youth Olympic Games qualifier, our developmental tour to Hungary, the U17 Kansas City tour that we're doing, and then the U19 World Championships and the Youth Olympic Games. So that's sort of our pathway through that. So looking at where we're at with our tours. So on the A pathway, we've got our full selections and registration all complete for Brazil. Of course, we've just rehashed what our objectives are, and of course the selection criteria. And we're trying to be as clear and transparent around each of our selections as we possibly can be. So of course we list them out and sort of what priority of selection that they achieved in order to be named to the team. So we are excited about that. And full transparency, we did have two additional athletes who we've added onto that tour, and that was primarily because they had been scheduled to go to the tour to Turkey. However, with some schedule changes with the Turkey tour no longer happening due to the conditions in the Middle East, and instead that tour going to Serbia, we had an opportunity to send them down to Brazil. And because they um, were at a reasonable maturity level, we and had been injured and unable to attend things earlier with Boxam, we decided that we would give them an opportunity to head to the World Cup and see how they do. Moving on. So Serbia. So this is the replacement for the event that we were going to have in Turkey. Um, the majority of these athletes, we just switched them right over from Turkey once we had the opportunity to talk to them. There will be a pre-camp in Montreal and then directly over to Serbia. We've got Samir and Ariane running this tour. And of course, we've got this list of athletes who are going. Um, I want to emphasize on this one, it is a B pathway event tour, but the results of Serbia will potentially impact our selections for the World Cup in China. But this tour, because of the slightly later dates, is actually right up before the other B Tour event that is going to Eindhoven. So we anticipate that we'll have a very different team going to each of these two events. And here's Eindhoven, which is like literally the next week. Um, and similar goals because it's a similar B level event. But we haven't finalized our registration for this one yet because we are waiting to see what the results are of Brazil. So if an athlete competes in Brazil, but they really have a hard time, they're out in the first round, it looks like the level of or standard required in order to be performant there was too high, then this would be, a backup opportunity for those athletes to go and see how they can do internationally. If an athlete goes to Brazil and they win a few rounds, they get, you know, especially if they get into the top eights, then they're meeting the goals of that tour. But we do want to make sure that we hold off until we've got those results from Brazil before we actually send in the registration for Eindhoven. So we'll see this one update um, in the next month once the athletes are back. Okay, and looking to our U19s, and I'm not sure why I've got Maggie's name up in the top there. That looks like an edit on my part, but congratulations to Maggie for being one of the athletes selected. This is a developmental tour. So the object that we've got here is to gain bouts against international competition and really to teach touring skills to our young athletes. And we've got sort of three levels of selection. I have identified on this list, for complete transparency, a few athletes, three actually, who I believe as the acting high performance director are probably going to be well served by going, but who did not meet the priority one or priority two criteria. And these are athletes who had gone to Thailand, had rushed back from Thailand into our national championships, and then were not able to finish in the top gold medal position at the U19 Nationals or the silver medal position. If we have spaces available on the tour, I would like to put them in, but I do not consider them a lock on a position at this point. I want to be clear about that. The criteria is quite clear about this. So we'll have to see how the uptake on the tour goes. But we had budgeted out for 16 athletes to be able to go, and we're slightly over that right now with this full list. But as I said, we'll see how the prioritization works out. With regards to coaches on this tour, we're just finalizing our plans for our national team coaches who are going. But we've also planned that if we had a club that had more than well, three or more athletes from their club going, that we would offer an opportunity for a personal coach to go. Our intention is to make sure that we have an adequate coach to athlete ratio. So we anticipate that there will be other personal coaches invited, but those opportunities are not ones that we feel confident in talking about right now. We have to have conversations with the club coaches to see who's interested. And there is also the possibility that instead of us saying that we have a personal coaches related to club, we may actually go to personal coach selection based on province. So we have to work through those, but we'll have some discussions with the clubs and with the provinces over the next couple of weeks in order to lock down those spots. I do believe, and I know that the rest of the national team coaching staff believes, that having these opportunities for our club and provincial coaches to get out into the world and see what the level is, particularly at our U19 level, is extremely valuable. And we're in agreement, so we're trying to find ways to make that happen. Looking to U17 Kansas City. So this is a new event. This was not part of the original NTP. This is one that we added in shortly after our U17 training camp. But we were responding to a need. It was quite clear that the coaches and athletes who had attended that camp were interested in going out and having an opportunity to compete as Team Canada. And so we found this event in Kansas City that we feel is appropriate for that goal. Pardon me. So the selection criteria were pretty simple. We've got a list of athletes based off of our gold medalists at the U17 level at our nationals. What I will say is we did not have very many U17 women who were competing, and we have only got three gold medalists at for this event. There may be extraordinary selections still to come where we see some developmental potential from other U17 athletes. So that's one that we're working on a little bit. And of course, we're still waiting for final confirmation about dates for this event, but we do know that it'll be sort of end of July, beginning of August. And U19 World Championship. So we have a location. That was exciting to get that. It will be in Montenegro, which is, if you're familiar with your Mediterranean geography, so it's off the Aegean, just north of Greece. And we've don't yet have firm dates, and we're speculating heavily on these dates, but again, we don't know for sure. Right now, we're planning on having a pre-camp in Montreal in order to get the athletes ready to go. But once we've got final dates, that may change those plans a little bit. And of course, the selection for this was already in the NTP, and we do know that we'll have Brad Ross and Jesse Pinerio as coaches. There will be other coaches going as well. We just haven't got those locked down yet, but the talk with potential coaches is ongoing. And that's all I've got on those guys. All right, moving on to Youth Olympic Games. So we've been through the international qualifier now, which was Thailand. We had 7 Canadian athletes who competed in that event, and we now are waiting, unfortunately, for the IOC and World Boxing to release the number of quota spots that have been reserved for Canada to send boxers. Initially, we had thought this could be as low as 2 and as high as 10, with a heavy emphasis on that we think it's going to be 2. However, after looking at the number of African countries who were at Thailand, I'm now a little bit more hopeful that we will be probably more like 4 or 5 spots with the potential for us to get all 7. But again, we're not going to know that until May. So what we've got right now is based on our criteria, a prioritized ranking list where we've got sort of 1 and 2 spots sort of quite well identified. And then we've got 4 athletes who are sitting sort of tied at sort of fourth in our ranking. But at this point, we do not have a completed winning style of play assessments done on those 4 ranked out athletes. And until those are done, we won't be able to put those into a greater priority list. Because winning style of play it's not like public information. We'll be sharing those winning style of play assessments with those athletes who are currently tied at fourth place, and we will be letting them know where they sit within that prioritization. Because one, it's good developmental information and can, have a strong influence on training as athletes are going forward. But also we want them to know where they sort of sit within that tied for fourth, because we will have that broken down when it comes to actual selections. If Canada is given full 7 spots, that would be fantastic. I would not anticipate that happening though, and we will send all 7 athletes. Also an update, we had anticipated, based on guidance from the IOC and from the COC, that this would be a very low cost tour. We're now getting word back that maybe that's not going to be the case. So as soon as the COC is able to give us an update on what the actual cost will be, Boxing Canada has reserved some money for this, but it is not a lot of money because we weren't anticipating it being a lot of money. But we will have an update as to what those fees actually are. And at this point, coaches for that tour, Brad Ross and Emma Suttle, we'll have those 2 coaches head over. Okay, and looking at upcoming dates. So we've updated the schedule a little bit here to make sure that we're in. And I'm looking through and everything looks pretty good. U19 World Championships, just not sure about. And of course, we do have on the schedule our elite nationals in Cape Breton. I will say I'm very happy with the preparations that Cape Breton has been doing. We are in good hands, both with the influence of the local clubs there and the Member 2 First Nation, who is hosting us at their facility and hotel, and with Boxing Nova Scotia. So kudos to all of them. Thank you for the great work that you're doing. And we anticipate that this is going to be an absolutely fantastic event out in Cape Breton. As soon as we have got sort of final details around costs, we'll be able to put up our registration system on Tracky, and we'll be updating the manual. Right now, the manual is quite bare bones, but you'll be happy to know we've updated the formatting on this, because you will know that the handbook format that I have been using and updating for a number of our national events has gotten a little bloated. So we've gone and done a full re-edit on it. And instead of doing a completely bilingual version, which was really easy for us as staff to update and to continue making sure the translations were completed on, we understand it made it challenging to find information because there's just a lot of words. So we will have a distinct French and English version of these in order to make everyone's life, hopefully, fingers crossed, a little easier. Okay. All right, and looking at our next HP update. So that'll be next month. We'll ask for some feedback. If you like the recorded version, let me know. If you like the live version, let me know. What we might do is we might do both. We might do a recorded version in advance and then just have one live Q&A session for anyone who actually has questions. But having these up on YouTube, I think, has been a good thing. And we're definitely going to continue having recordings of the meetings. Okay, and if you need copies of previous HP updates or anything else, or access to these slides, see down in the description, you'll find that information available to you. Okay, Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup de votre temps aujourd'hui, and I look forward to seeing you later.